Hi, my name is Courtney Gann. I'm a PhD candidate here at Texas Tech University, and I look forward to sharing with you today my application research experience and the innovative partnerships I formed in my community with homeschooling parents. Did you know that homeschooling in the United States is on a rise? In 2011, the National Center for Educational Statistics estimated that there were currently 1.77 million homeschooled students. This is up from their 2007 estimate of approximately 1.5 million homeschool students. Those numbers mean that comparatively, more students have experienced a homeschool educational setting than those enrolled in charter or voucher schools. And this trend is not just limited to the United States, it's being seen on a global basis. Countries such as France, Australia, Canada, and the UK are also seeing increases in their homeschooling population. But despite these increases in homeschooling as an educational opportunity, very little is known about how parents go about homeschooling and the teaching and strategies they use in a homeschooling environment, specifically in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. So I look forward to sharing with you what I learned through my partnerships with the homeschooling community today. My research is entitled STEM Teaching Strategies of High School Parents with Homeschool Students, and I want to begin by looking at the purpose of my research. The problem behind the purpose of my research is that very little quality research exists about this area of school reform, meaning homeschool. Large gaps exist in the knowledge of how parents go about homeschooling on a day-to-day basis and what teaching and learning strategies they use in their educational activities. The purpose of my study was to investigate the STEM educational activities of high school students in homeschools and to investigate the strategies used in homeschools to teach STEM concepts. And I'll be looking at it from the parental point of view as the teacher. The research question which guided my study was what teaching and learning strategies are used by parents or guardians in a homeschool environment. And this connects directly to the two trademarks of my Global Prize program. The first is that Global STEM Educator. And as I introduced, this problem of not knowing much about homeschool and the growth in homeschool is a global problem. This isn't something that's just limited to the United States. These are things that we're seeing in the UK and in other countries. Also, as a pragmatic researcher in STEM education, I'm directly involved with a partnership with my homeschooling parents. So what I learned through this research, I'm able to put into practice in helping them teach their students. So it was a very practical experience for me. I want to start by looking at the theoretical framework and literature review, which guided my study. I'll pull my theory and literature from two main areas. The first is educational theories of human learning, and these theories form the basis for the majority of teaching and learning strategies used in educational environments, which would of course include homeschooling in this case. And what I want to say here is my goal in using these theories, I'll go over 4 of them in a minute, which informed my study, is not to match a specific theory to a parent or to see exactly what theories are at work in a homeschooling environment. Rather, these theories provide me as a researcher a foundation for investigating teaching and learning strategies in educational environments, which in this case again is homeschooling. The second is I look at a literature review of our current understanding of homeschooling methods and curriculum. And what this does is it shows me what the current understanding of homeschooling is in the literature and allows me to build from that platform. So first we'll look at the educational theories that I used in this study. The first is the behavioral learning theory. It comes from the work of Skinner, who viewed learning as the acquisition of facts and concepts. This theory views learning as an observable, measurable change in behavior, often in response to a stimuli, and it's primarily the result of experience. So what was important to me is looking at the teaching strategies that come from this theory. Teaching strategies include direct lecture, practice, and the repetition of desired skills. The second educational theory I used to inform my research was information processing from the work of J.R. Anderson, who was concerned with how people think and process the information they receive from the environment. This theory seeks to know how learners interpret stimuli, then how they store and retrieve that knowledge for later use. Again, what was important to me is the teaching strategies that come from this theory, which include methods for helping students pay attention, connecting new information to prior knowledge, and providing cues for recall. The third theory I used was individual constructivism from the work of Piaget, who viewed knowledge as being actively constructed rather than simply acquired by individuals. In this theory, learning is a conceptual change in cognitive development. And again, the strategies which stem from this theory encourage interactions with the environment and multiple learning opportunities. And the final theory I used in my research is social constructivism from the work of Vygotsky, who viewed knowledge as socially and culturally constructed. Children learn through social interactions, often by the use of cultural tools. And again, the importance is the teaching strategies that come from this theory, which include collaboration and group learning activities. Before I move on and wrap up this section and move into my homeschool review, I just want to note that these theories shouldn't be seen as competing. Rather, they provide a holistic view of learning and provide me as a researcher the foundation for investigating teaching and learning strategies in educational environments. In terms of the general curricular practices in homeschooling, it's been found that parents employ a wide range of both curricular practices and teaching methods when they homeschool their children. They use published curriculum, but they often combine curriculum from multiple sources and feel freedom in modifying that curriculum to meet their children's needs. There's also been seen a heavy reliance on a homeschool community for resources and activities for their children, possibly access to tutors or access to other classes or learning environments. Specifically in STEM education, homeschooling parents tend to focus on lifelong learning by promoting natural curiosity and engagement with information. There's the use of free choice learning opportunities, and these are learning opportunities that occur through places such as zoos, museums, or libraries where people have a choice of what they learn in that environment. However, also in STEM education, parents have expressed concern about knowing what their children need because parents do not feel like the content experts in this area. So my methodology goes back to my research question, and since the goal of my research was to provide an in-depth understanding of a case, specifically homeschooling, and a comparison across multiple parents, my research fits directly into a qualitative case study, which is the methodology I used. My participants in this case study were parents and guardians of homeschool students who participated in a local homeschool learning group, which is often called a co-op. And this is where my partnership comes in. This co-op employs people from the community to come in and teach classes to the homeschool students. So for the last 2.5 years, I have been teaching in this co-op as the chemistry teacher. So even though I've never been homeschooled and I don't homeschool my children, I've been able to establish relationships within this homeschooling community. The criteria for participating in my research was that the parents or guardians had to see themselves as their child's teacher, they had to have at least one student taking a high school level course, and the student had to be homeschooled during the course of the research, meaning they could not be enrolled in a public, charter, or private school for any courses. My data collection procedures, I had a 2-phase qualitative case study following all IRB procedures. Phase 1 was an open-ended online questionnaire that was sent to the parents, and I had 29 participants volunteer for that, and they simply answered questions, very open-ended questions about the types of teaching and learning strategies they use and their educational activities. Phase 2 was follow-up observations, interviews, and artifact collection from parents on the questionnaire who volunteered for those follow-up procedures. And I had 10 participants who volunteered for the follow-up procedures. And here's where I believe the importance of my partnership within this community was very important, because I had parents who were willing to open their homes to me and let me see what they were doing in their homeschooling environment and to get a better idea of the teaching and learning strategies they use. So you're about to see some clips showing my partnership with this community. First, you'll see some clips involving me and how I help this community in teaching a lab for them. Then you'll see clips of parents working with their students in teaching environments, whether that was in the home or maybe in a class setting at a local center. And last, you'll see kind of the member checking process I used with these participants to talk about what I was learning and how I could help them out. Okay, so today we're going to look at acid and base reactions and how to write them. So remember, acid plus base makes salt plus water. This is also a double displacement reaction, so you're just flip-flopping your ion. So the H combines with the OH to make water. Hydrochloric acid plus sodium hydroxide makes what we normally call table salt, but sodium chloride and water. And then what you want to do now is come back and make sure it's all balanced. This one's pretty easy, but it's always good to make sure before you start any math.
Okay, tell me what chapter that Miss Courtney went over with you this week.
We went over Module 13.
Okay, so you're taking Chapter 12 test today, and then you're on Chapter 13.
Yeah, we actually are finishing this right now.
Okay. Have you done all the on your own problems with Miss Courtney?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to check those. And then you'll finish Chapter 13 next Tuesday?
We actually finished it this Tuesday.
Okay, so you'll need to test on Chapter 13 next week. And then how many chapters do you have left before the year ends?
We have technically 3.
3.
But I don't know if we're doing the last one or not.
Okay, so you feel good about Chapter 13?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
What is the absolute value of negative 3? What's it equal? 3. Okay, so that's going to be true. We're about to write this out in a number line, and I'm going to show you how to graph that, okay? So, if you want to, if you have this question, what numbers in the absolute value line can equal 4? What is your answer? There's 2 things I could put in this absolute value line that would come out to be 4. 4, absolute value of 4 is 4, and the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. So these are the 2 areas.
As I went through the years and learned from my mistakes, One thing that I knew I always wanted to do was develop critical thinking skills, with the end result not being a grade, but the ability to teach themselves. And so that's what I've seen, especially with my oldest. She's been self-teaching since, started around 5th grade and was completely self-taught by the end of middle school. And so it was the ability for them to figure it out for themselves was the goal for me, not so much a grade. We spend all of our time with our kids, so we really know our kids. So we figure out real quick how they're bent and what they want to do because they share that with us. You know, we can see what their interest is. Is it STEM? Is it art? Is it writing? Whatever the case may be, you're able to determine this is kind of where I want to go. So then you start looking that way and work your way backwards. Well, if this is where you want to go, then this is what we have to do to get there. And I learned right along with my kids. When I first started homeschooling, it was the best. And we would, history, I love history. So I would read out loud to them, and we would read, we used a curriculum called Story of the World, and it was history was broken up over 4 years. And so it was wonderful. So we've always talked about it, that collaboration of, you know, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? It wasn't, when did it happen necessarily, although they could figure that out. It was, what do you think about what happened? And so they were able to develop their critical thinking skills with that. People like you that have that special skill set, we love you. And because that is a worry that a lot of homeschoolers have. Will I be able to do this? And parents get a little, especially with the higher math, the higher sciences, the parents can get concerned about it. So, but again, we just look at the community, look at the resources that we have, and we match those up. Who's available to do this? I have people now calling me, I'd like to teach, I'd like to teach, I'd like to teach, or tutor, or whatever the case may be. So the demand is there, but also the supply is beginning to be there even more so now.
My data analysis, I used coding in Deduce. I used the interviews and observation transcripts to develop categories and themes, and then the documents and artifacts went through the exact same coding process to further validate those themes. And of course, for trustworthiness, I used triangulation and member checks throughout the process. And obviously, the protection of my participants was very important, so I used the use of pseudonyms throughout the process and destroyed any identifiable information. And of course, the people who you saw on the videos just a minute ago gave permission for me to use them. My results, I had 4 main categories that emerged through data analysis that referred back to my research question. The first is the idea of individualized instruction. And this category showed that parents very much customized the curriculum and the learning strategies they used. They would often look at the needs of their child and then determine what courses that child needs to take, but along with the courses, how does their child learn best? And they would choose activities to best meet the needs of those child. Underneath this category were 2 subcategories. Mastery learning techniques is the first one, and these are techniques that encourage students to learn material before moving on. So to these parents, it wasn't just about taking a test and moving on to the next chapter. They really wanted their students to learn the material, so they promoted activities such as retaking tests, correcting assignments, again, very individualized to what that student needed to succeed. And then the second was one-on-one tutoring, and this was where I saw parents or tutors working directly with children, which was a very highly used strategy in this environment. The second is self-directed study. This category referred to parents transferring the responsibility of learning to their students. They did this by encouraging students to pursue topics of interest, allowing the students to work independently, and checking on their progress as they went. The next category, which I saw very much in my data, was collaboration, and I saw 2 really distinct categories of collaboration in this homeschooling environment. The first was collaboration with peers, in that parents enrolled their students in other opportunities for their students to collaborate with their peers, such as the co-op classes or clubs or tutoring groups, which that's very often seen in typical educational environments. It's the second type of collaboration that I found very unique to this setting, and that was the collaboration with parents. And this wasn't parents acting as teachers to their students, delivering information or lecturing. This was parents working alongside their students to construct knowledge together, learning together in this educational setting. And the last one was application and connection. Homeschooling parents tended to promote schoolwork that was relevant and connected across subject domains. A lot of them mentioned, like, I want my student to see this in real life. I want them to know how it connects. And they also wanted them to see how science connects to math, connects to engineering, and can solve problems. And so a lot of times they would They would put learning in everyday situations. They would talk about physics if they were working on the car, or mechanics. They would talk about biology on hikes. And they also promoted hands-on lab type experiences. So in conclusion, going back to my research question, what STEM teaching and learning strategies are used by parents or guardians in a homeschooling environment? Parents use individualized, customizable approaches to education. They rely heavily on self-directed study for the student, and collaboration as well as application and connection were important teaching and learning strategies used. What's really neat to me is in these conclusions, I also see at work those theories which I talked about at the beginning, which provided the framework for my study. When you look at a very individualized, customizable approach and you think of mastery learning, the repetition of practice problems, retaking tests, redoing assignments, that really shows some behaviorism learning in that. When you think about self-directed study, that has components of individual constructivism, as well as learning how to recall, memory, again, practice problems, which brings in information processing and behaviorism. And then again, collaboration really brings in that social constructivism. So it was really neat to see all those theories coming out in my results. The implications for my research, and I really try to take a practical stance on this, and how do these help me as someone providing resources to this unique community of homeschooling parents, is that the resources that these parents need should be flexible and customizable, and should also include many different types of activities. Since the parents pay attention to what their students need to learn, they should have many different options to choose from. Second, resources should also be practical and have connections to other subjects, and should realize that parents are learning alongside their students. So the resources should not only be just for the students, but should assist parents and students in learning together. So my future plans for continuing to work within this community: I want to continue to work with parents to determine what specific resources they need in STEM education based on the teaching and learning strategies I know are in use in this environment. There's also the institution of a new tutorial program next year, which I will be a part of, and it's going to provide more access to expert teachers like myself in specific subject areas in the STEM field. I also want to provide resources to both parents and students to assist them in learning STEM together and really build on that piece of the collaboration within this process. So I thank you so much for listening to my research today. I hope you enjoyed learning about my research in the homeschooling community. I really enjoyed working with these parents and learning from them, and I look forward to putting into practice the things I learned in continuing to work with them over the next couple of years. Obviously, the research I presented today has some limitations in terms of the methodology. My qualitative case study focused on a very purposefully selected small community of homeschooling parents, so the results I share with you today may not apply to all homeschooling families in all locations. However, future research should continue to investigate this community, looking at teaching and learning strategies across different age bands in homeschool, with different states and different communities, and of course on a global basis. Thank you so much for listening to me today.